Well, hello there. My name's Mick, and the title of this video is 75 Not Out. Why is it called that? Because I'm 75 and not out. But let's get started anyway. Let's go back to 1976. I'm going home from work. I had a butcher's shop in Leeds, and I'm driving through the estate, and I see a guy that I used to play rugby league with. He had a great name. His name was Johnny Walker. I said through the window, "Hello, John, I haven't seen you for a while." He said, "Mick, how you doing?" I said, "I'm doing really good." I said, "Where have you been?" "Oh, Mick, I've been in Adelaide for the last 5 years." "Adelaide?" "Yeah, Adelaide, Australia." "Oh, there you go." I said, "We were thinking about going to live in Spain. We're sick of being wet and cold, and every winter that comes along there's somebody on strike, the power people, the dockers, the miners. So we're looking at moving to Spain, a bit of sunshine." "Oh, no, you've got to go to Adelaide." "Why is that?" "Well, for a start, they speak English." I thought, well, that's a good opportunity, isn't it, if they speak English? I said, right. So anyway, we went into his mother's house where he was staying, and he showed me some photographs and told me all about Adelaide and how sensational it was to live there, and so on and so on and so on. Anyway, the time flew, and before I knew where it was 8 o'clock, and I got home a couple of hours late, and the wife said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Oh, I bumped into Johnny Walker, a guy I used to play with at Leeds." She said, "Well, your tea's in the dog." Oh, the dog had a good feed, didn't it? So I said, and he's been in Adelaide for the last 5 years as Johnny Walker. I said, "What do you think about going to Adelaide instead of Spain?" She went, "Well, it's a fair distance from Spain, isn't it?" I said, "Well, yeah, it's a long way from Spain." But needless to say, 12 months later, we landed in Adelaide, having sold everything we owned in this mighty land of England. And next stop, Adelaide. Sunday afternoon, we got off the plane, and we were met by the people from the particular powers that be, the consulate, and they took us to our new accommodation. Well, I'm not easy to shock, but our new accommodation amounted to a tin shed, a corrugated iron tin shed. Well, needless to say, my wife wasn't impressed, and neither were I. But they decided to take us in and show us around this accommodation, which amounted to, in one room there was a wardrobe, and in the next room there was a sink and a green vinyl sofa that made up as the bed as well. Anyway, they showed us through the place, did the people from the department, and then they went. So we thought, well, we're here, we better make the best of it. So just then I saw someone outside, and I said, "Excuse me, is there a pub nearby?" He said, "Yeah, just across the paddock." And I had to think, paddock, field. "Yeah, it's just round the corner." Well, by this time it was about 5:30 on a Sunday afternoon. But we wandered across the paddock, round the corner, and there was the pub. So we went in. There wasn't a soul in it, except a barman, and he was stood behind the bar, and he looked at me in a strange sort of a way. He said, "We close at 6. I thought, isn't it great? We've only just got in the door and he's telling us what time to close. Needless to say, we had a couple of beers and we wandered back out at 6 when they asked us to leave. And we went across the paddock in the dark to our accommodation. And we got the key in the door, and when we opened the door it was pitch black. But we knew where the switch was. It was a piece of string hanging from the light on the wall, and we pulled the string. But before we did, we heard these scratching noises, and we thought, what's that? Anyway, when we pulled the cord and the light came on, there, all over the floor, were the largest cockroaches you've ever seen. You could throw a saddle on them. And they were running everywhere. Well, needless to say, my wife wasn't impressed. They went under the wardrobe, they went under the door that went through to the next accommodation, and they vanished. So we thought, well, next best thing is to get this bed. And the bed was a green vinyl sofa that you folded the back down, and two wooden legs dropped out of the back to support that part. And on its back, it looked like a capital B laid on its back. And it kind of went, if you went one way, you slipped into the middle of the bed. And if you went the other way, you slipped off the edge onto the floor. So I thought, oh, this is really good. So we tried to get some sleep. After nearly a day and a half in the skies, we were fairly tired, so we managed to get a little bit of sleep, not much. Next morning, a bright sunny day, and we found the shadow, the bathroom and toilets, and went across and did our ablutions over there, and then we found out where the dining room was for this accommodation, and we were quite surprised when we got in the dining room. It was a very large room, and the buffet, for lack of a better terminology, was quite intensive. There was everything: lamb chops, steak, sausages, bacon, eggs, beans, tomatoes, you name it, they had it there. So we had a good feed, and then we came out and went back to our accommodation. Started chatting to some people in the next unit to us who'd been there for 18 months. They loved it. But apparently after 6 months you have to make a special application for why you want to spend more time there, because you can't get work or you can't find somewhere suitable to live. And they'd been there 3 of these 6-month sections, and they loved it. They used to sit outside sunbaking, and I thought, oh, great this. Well, needless to say, I decided we were going to find some work and get out of there real quick. And we did. I got out to a telephone box with a load of 10-cent pieces. I rang a few butcher shops, to which I was told by one of them, oh, it's different here, mate. We had an Englishman that worked for us here, and he just couldn't adapt. He just, he cost us money, basically. I said, what do you mean he can't? Well, it's different, I said, hang on, are the bull's horns at one end and the tail at the other? Oh, yeah. I said, well, it's just the same where we come from. Just the same. Anyway, needless to say, I didn't get anywhere with that fella, because he'd been burnt already by someone. But I did finally find a fella who said, look, I'll tell you what, I'm the supervisor for a chain of supermarkets, meat rooms. Can you meet me at this address tomorrow morning? I said, sure. And I'll never forget his name. His name was Colin Patmore. And I went down there to Glenelg, and I met Colin, and he said, when would you like to start? I said, when would you like me to start? Well, he said, it's Friday today. Well, why don't you start on Monday? Okay, I'll be here. What time? 7:30. Okay, I'll be here at 7:30. Sure enough, down we went. And I met the manager, Ted, and a couple of apprentices and the packers. And they were all nice enough people. They kept saying, I beg yours. They couldn't understand me through my Yorkshire accent, which I didn't think I had, but they thought I had. But Anyway, we settled in there, and after a few days, I said to the wife, well, it's all right, looks like a permanent job, does this? And what say we try and get something on the seafront? So we did. We got a nice apartment on the seafront at Glenelg. Walk across the road onto the beach, into the sea. Oh, this is living. Yeah. And then at the end of the week, Colin Patmore, the supervisor, came in. He said, how's it going? I said, it's going pretty good. Right, he said, and there's a bit of a hesitation. Well, look, I don't want you coming here on Monday. I thought, here we go. I've been here a week and I've got the bullet already. So I said, why is that? He said, well, I'm going to make you the manager up at our store at Glen Osmond. To which I said, Glen Osmond? Where's that? Bear in mind, we've only been in Australia for about 10 days at this point, a fortnight. I said, it's not far. I said, well, it's just that we've just rented a place on the seafront at Glenelg. Oh, he said, no, it's not far. It's not far. Well, as it happened, I bought a car, a Holden, good old Holden, because I had a car coming over. I had a Volvo station wagon on the sea coming over, but it hadn't arrived. So I had this nice old Holden, and it went like the clappers in this car. And sure enough, I told the wife what was happening, and she said, that's okay, we'll go up and start. So we did. Monday morning, I showed up at the new place where I was now manager, introduced myself to the store manager, and then introduced myself to the staff in the meat room. One was a young apprentice butcher, and he was very good, a nice young fella, very amiable. And the other was a lady packer. Now, I didn't know it, but this lady packer had been the muse for the manager that got the sack. So I wasn't having a good time with her. So after a few days, I said to her, look, we can either get along and you work with me, or you just leave. So she kind of looked at me as if to say, oh, hang on, I've had a job here for a long time and you're now telling me I haven't got a job. And I said, look, it's up to you. If you want to work with me, just say the word. No, I'll leave, she said. I said, okay, I'll get up and make you pay up. You can finish today. And that's what we did. She finished. We got another packer in who was great. She was a lovely lady, very, very good. Knew how to pack meat to show it on its best. And I thought, well, it's so far so good. Anyway, I'd been there about, I guess, 3 months. And the manager, store manager, he stepped out of line a couple of times, telling me how to do things, and he had no butchering ability whatsoever, or how to stock a meat unit. And one day he said something wrong that I didn't like. And you probably guessed I've got a bit of an accent. It's a Yorkshireman's accent, and we don't suffer fools gladly, I'm afraid. So I said to him, well, look, Peter, this is your store. This is my meat room, all right? So we know where we're at. So I'll look after this, and you look after that, and everybody will be sweet. Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, it went on, and then about 2 or 3 weeks later, he stepped over the line again. I said, well, as I said to you last time, Peter, this from that line there to me is my business, and I'll manage that. You happy with what's happening? Oh, yeah, right, okay. So, fine, I'll manage that. You worry about what's going on out there. But if I have any more feedback from you, negative like this, I'll just put my notice in. And he kind of went, there's no need for that, but okay. So he went away, and then about 3 weeks passed, and he came in again and said something. And I said, Peter, I'm going to give you a week's notice right now. I'll finish at the end of the week. How's that sound? Oh, no, there's no need to be like that. I said, no, there is. There is. I did tell you, and you just didn't listen, obviously. So, at the end of this week, I'll be going home and I won't be coming back. So, he went out of the meet room and 5 minutes went by and the phone rang, and picked it up, and it was the general manager for the group. And he said, I've just had a word with the manager, Peter, and he said that you've put your notice in. I said, yes, that's right. He said, what if we give you more money? I said, it's not about money, right? It's not about money at all. It's about being happy where you're working. I said, I did tell Peter that I'm more than capable of running this. I've increased the takings. I've done everything right by the company, and he just wants to put his 4 pence in. I'll come down and see you. I said, please yourself. Come down and see me if you like. And he did. Later on that day, came down. And I'd never met him. Shook my hand, introduced himself. Tried once again to say, stay. I said, no, I can't. Well, he said, Peter's is a very good manager. I said, is he? Oh yeah, his numbers are all right. I said, well, ask some of his staff, because he rules this place by fear. Right? They work here for the money. That's all. They don't work here because they like working here. Ask any of them. Oh, and they looked a bit surprised. I said, well, you give it some thought, and I'll get back to you later on in the week. I said, fine, you do that. And he did. He got back to me on the Friday and said, have you changed your mind? I said, no, not at all. Not at all. I'll finish up tomorrow lunchtime on Saturday, and I'll thank you for the opportunity to work in Australia, and I hope I've done the right thing by the company and by you. Oh, it's very sad to hear this, you know. Anyway, I finished up Saturday lunchtime, went home, and within a couple of days, I found a job. It wasn't the ideal job. It was at the meatworks. But I was told there's 2 forms of pay at this meatworks. One is the standard hourly rate, which was such and such. And the other one was when you got on the tally. And the tally is when so many animals have gone through and they're on your section. You get paid so much per animal, and it's 40% more than what you get normally. So I thought, that's all right. Anyway, I started, and the first 2 days there, all I did was pull muslin bags onto lambs that were hung up and tie them at the ankles. That's all I did. Finally, I said to the foreman, are you aware that I'm a butcher, qualified butcher? Oh, he said, no, I didn't know that. Come with me. So he took me down to this room where they had all these particular stores that they used for each section, and he gave me a knife and a belt and a pouch for the knife, and a mesh glove so you can't cut yourself, and they put me on what's called pelting. Now, if you're not sure what pelting is, it's the removal of the lamb skin off the carcass. And I can tell you, it's bloody hard work, because you've got to punch it off, and it's hard work. Anyway, I was doing this job, and I said to the guy just up the road from me on the chain, how long you been here, mate? He said, 6 months. All right. Are you on the tally? He said, no, not yet. I said, 6 months? No, I said, well, how do you get on the tally then? He said, Oh, they tell you. They decide when you get on the tally. Oh, I said, right. So I said, that bloke up there, is he on the tally? Yeah, yeah. I said, all right. All right. Does it bother you that he's doing the same job as you and me, and he's getting about 40% more per week? Oh, yeah, but eventually I'll get on the tally. I said, you're right. Okay. Well, I did it another couple of days. And then I got a phone call one night from this guy who owned, he owned 2 or 3 businesses around Adelaide. And one of them was he had the franchise for Presto Small Goods, which was a Sydney company. And he was the distributor around Adelaide. Now, he said to me, I've been given your name. Tell me that you're a good worker. And can you drive a truck? I said, yeah, of course I can. How do you feel about selling? Second nature. Okay. Can you get down and see me tomorrow? I said, sure. So I went down to see him. Now, it was selling Presto Small Goods. Now, small goods didn't mean anything to me. I had no idea what small goods were. But they are continental things. Salamis, cooked meats, etc., etc. So I said, how would you feel about going around the delicatessen selling this? I said, no problems. You just give me a list of where you want me to go and I'll sell them. So I said, when can you start? I said, tomorrow morning. Oh, okay, great. So I turned up next morning at 7:30. Loaded up the van with stuff. I got a list of where he goes. And off I went. Anyway, I did it for a couple of days. And then I was passing the meatworks one day, and I thought, oh, I'll pop in and let them know, you know, that I've left and so on and so on and so on. And this, as it happened, when I went in the office, this guy who was the foreman on the line where I was working, he said, oh, you're Michael. I said, that's right. He said, what's the go? Have you left or what? I said, yeah, they have, yeah. He said, do you normally just leave just like that? I said, well, no, not really. But I said, I believe that at the end of each working day, you can tap me or the next man on the shoulder and say, we won't need you tomorrow because we haven't got enough cattle or sheep coming in. Yeah, that's right. I said, well, if it's good for you, it's good for me. So, I won't be coming in tomorrow or any other day. But I thank you very much. Anyway, they sorted out my pay that was due, and that came through. And I did this small goods for a while, calling in at delicatessens with Italians and Greeks and Slavs and Poles and Hungarians and all nationalities. And they were great. They had a great sense of humour. They liked the food. One of the places I went, I'd never seen it before, but he used to drink a glass of olive oil every day. And I couldn't imagine anything worse than that. But he did it in front of me. Full glass of olive oil. Down it went. Should try it, he said. I said, not me, mate. Oh, it holds all your works, your joints, and that's all right, good. My joints are okay. And I did that for quite some time. And then one night, I was at training. I played rugby league when I went over to Australia first off. And I was at training, and one of the guys I played with, Phil, he was a chartered accountant. And he said to me, that bloke that's at the bar, Mick, he wants to have a word with you when you're finished, when you've had a shower. Oh, okay. Oh, so who is he? Oh, he's my manager. Oh, right, okay. So I thought, here we go. So I got changed and went across to him, introduced myself. He said to me, what's your wages? What's your yearly earnings? I said, 10 grand. You know, kind of bragging. Is that it? $10,000? Are you happy with that? I said, well, I don't know, what have you got in mind? How would you like 30,000? I thought, there we go. I said, what do I have to do for that? Rob a bank? He said, no, not quite. Not quite, far from it. He said, if you can call into my office one day this week, I'll explain it a bit further. Okay, so I called into his office, and it was a company called AMP Society, Australian Mutual Provident Insurance Company. Well, I knew nothing about insurance, nothing. But I'm a quick learner, and when they start talking 30,000 instead of 10,000, I'm even quicker. So he said, look, this is what we do, and you learn good money. You know, wear a shirt and a tie, is that a problem? I said, not at all, not at all. He said, okay. When would you like it? We're going to put you on a training course. You've got 2 weeks on a training course. We'll teach you how to approach people and sell insurance. I said, sounds good to me. So sure enough, 2 weeks later, I started on this training course. And it was good. It was really intensive. Because there's a lot of, you know, people think you just sell insurance. You don't just sell insurance. You have to know all the ins and outs and the legalities and so on and so on and so on. So I'm a quick learner, and I learned very quickly. Well, the first few weeks were a bit sketchy because I wasn't on a salary. I'm on pure commission only. So the first few weeks were a little bit it's bread and jam tonight. But anyway, I soon picked it up, and within no time at all, I was earning good money. And as time went by, it got better. And before long, they had me going around to other sales centres, teaching the salesmen how to get appointments, because they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to do it, and the simple reason they didn't know how to do it was they got on the phone and they wanted to start selling their product, and that's not the idea. The idea is to get an appointment in either their work or in their house, and then sell them your product. So I went round and I taught them all that. And the only reason I did okay was because there was no point in me trying to sell over the phone, because most of the times they couldn't understand the bloody word I was saying. So I'd just make an appointment to go around and see them on Thursday night at 6:30 or something like that. And Bob's your uncle, there we go. Needless to say, the first 12 months, my salary was 32,000. So it was a nice step up from 10,000. And I really enjoyed it. I'm a people person, and it was meeting people, solving people's problems. And until you've put some life insurance on someone, and that someone's passed away by accident or something, you don't realise what you've done for that family. Well, I had that happen to me within a very short time. And you really appreciate what you do. And I did it for 6 years. 6 years. And then a pal of mine who I played rugby with, he went over to Queensland to work with his mother-in-law. She owned a caravan park in Queensland. And we said, when it got cool in June, we'd drive over. So we did, we drove over. It's a fair drive as well, I'll tell you. From Leeds to from Adelaide to where was it? Caloundra. So we had a couple of weeks there, and the weather was beautiful. I said to my wife, this is where we need to be. This is where we need to be. So we went back and we sold up the house, sold up everything. And we bought a camper van, very nice camper van. We thought we'll make it a holiday of it, getting over there. And we did. We stopped off in a few places, and then we got to Caloundra and spent some time there with our friends. And then the next stop we went to was Noosa. And Noosa was the go-ahead tourism capital of Queensland. And people were making a lot of money there. So I thought, well, here we go. Let's go to Noosa. So we got to Noosa, got into a caravan park with the camper, had a look around, Lovely place, lovely beach, nice restaurants, but nothing left in the way of opportunity. So I thought, well, I looked on the maps, I thought, well, where's the next coastal town? And the next coastal town was Hervey Bay. Hervey Bay, with the lovely Fraser Island offshore. Fraser Island is the largest sand island in the world, and it shelters the bay of Hervey Bay, and so there's never any surf there. It's always beautiful, beautiful. So we got to Hervey Bay, and we managed to rent a place, and then I had a look around. I thought, well, what is there to do here? Well, the Esplanade was, 4 or 5 kilometres long, and there wasn't much in the way of transport along it. So I thought, well, how do people get about when they come on holiday? So I bought some bikes. I bought 10 bikes, and I bought 4 tandem bikes, and I bought 12 50cc Honda scooters. And I got a premises just off the Esplanade, just one shot back from the Esplanade, and it was perfect. And it was just before Christmas when the holidays started, and we just killed it. We just made all the money we paid for these bicycles and what have you. We got that back in no time at all. Needless to say, along came the end of the school holidays, and it went quiet again. Now, Hervey Bay was known as God's waiting room for the simple reason a lot of the retirees down in Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide, when they retired, to get away from the cold weather in the winters, they'd come up to Hervey Bay. Hence the terminology, God's waiting room. Well, some of them were in that position, but some of them were just very likely people, very lively people, and they liked the warm weather in the winter months. And it was great. But then along came the end of the school holidays, and it went quiet. The bikes weren't moving as much as they were. Scooters were still going out occasionally, but nothing much. And then one day a young couple came in, and a nice smart young couple. He said to me, do you know where I can rent a 4-wheel drive from? I said, what's it for? Oh, to go on Fraser Island. Well, I said, well, there's that company on the way in, on the road into Hervey Bay. They rent 4-wheel drives out. Won't look at me, he said, I'm only 24. I said, and? He said, well, they won't rent to anyone under 25. I said, oh, so you can be 24, and next Sunday you can be 25 and they'd rent to you. So there's a difference. He said, I know, I tried telling that. I said, okay. And I chatted to him and his girlfriend, and they seemed like nice, smart young people. They'd been through university and so on, so they weren't dummies. So, as it happens, I just bought a 4-wheel drive for ourselves. So I said to him, well, look, how long were you going to go on Fraser Island for? He said, 3 days. I said, and what were they going to charge you? He said, $120 a day. Hello. Well, I said, look, that car over there you see parked, that's mine. And because you seem like a nice, bright young couple, I'm willing to rent it to you if you look after it like it's your own car. Oh, yeah. Okay. Where are you going to stay over there? Because there is, the accommodation over there is fairly expensive if you can get it. Oh, we camp. Have you got camping gear? Oh, we've got to buy a tent, a little tent and 2 sleeping bags. All right, okay, all right. Well, I tell you what, you get in here tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. I'll have the car full of gas, ready to go, and you can go on Fraser Island for 3 days. As long as you look after my car. Oh, yeah, no problem, he said. So, sure enough, they turned up with the camping gear, a little stove and some pans, and probably spent a couple of $100. And off they went in my 4-wheel drive. My wife said, oh dear, what have we done? Well, needless to say, They came back and they'd had a great time and they couldn't thank us enough. The car was lovely. They'd stopped at a car wash actually on the edge of town and given it a wash down. I thought, hang on, there's an opportunity here. So I started looking around for some four-wheel drives, and I bought a couple of truck carriers. And as soon as I bought them, they were off, going out every day. And within a short time, I had a dozen of them, and things were going good. I'm not a mechanic, but luckily, just down the street from me was a workshop, mechanical workshop, Peter, who was very good, and he agreed to run over my vehicles if there was a problem and fix them for me urgently that night. So we were okay. And it just started to just skyrocket. Four-wheel drives onto Fraser Island. And no dramas. You can't do it now. You can't just rent a four-wheel drive and go on Fraser Island. It's very much a protected thing. It's not even called Fraser Island anymore. It's called K'gari, Kgari. It's a native word because the local natives reckon it's their island. Most of them have probably never been on it. But that's the story. Needless to say, me and my wife suddenly had a business that was going really good. Really good. So, what I'll do is I'll stop now and I'll make that 75 not out part 1. And in the next day or so, I'll do part 2. And it gets more and more interesting. If you like it, ring the bell and subscribe. Thank you.